Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Peter Evans, if you're new here, and in today's tutorial, we are going to dive into the world of the Users app, a powerful application that handles the custom user accounts in our Django project. And our user app is designed to manage various roles and permissions within our farm management system. But before we begin, let's take a look at the users model. Our custom user model inherits from the default Django user model and extends it with additional fields to capture the essential information. And within this custom user model, we have a range of important fields such as the username, the first name, the last name, and even the sex. We also have a unique phone number field that is validated using the Django's phone number package. And the users app also introduces the concept of roles and permissions. We shall have 5 distinct roles, that is the farm owner, the farm manager, assistant farm manager, the team leader, as well as a farm worker. And each role has specific permissions within our farm management system. And then to interact with our custom user model, we have created two serializers, the custom user create serializer as well as the custom user serializer. These serializers handle the creation, retrieval, and updating of user instances with their respective fields and roles. And then for the URLs and the views, our users app also comes with a set of APIs to handle the role assignments and dismissals. We shall have views like the assign farm owner view, assign farm manager view, assign assistant farm manager view, assign a team leader view, as well as assign farm worker view. And today, we'll explore all aspects of the users app, from creating users with specific roles to managing permissions and unique username generation. And so, let's dive in. By now, I'm pretty sure that you're well familiar with the structure of this project, where at the root of our project, we have the folders that contains the apps that we've already created from the previous tutorials, that is the dairy inventory, the poultry inventory, and today we are introducing the users app. And in the users app, we have these several files, the choices, models, permissions, serializers, urls.py, validators.py, as well as the views. Starting with the choices.py, we shall have two choices for the sex field, that is the male and the female. And then we roll over to the models.py, where we have a single model that we are introducing, the custom user model. This model inherits from the abstract user, that is from the Django out models. And with this model, we shall be extending the fields that are available within the default Django user model. That is, we shall be adding the phone number field as well as the sex field. And so, in a brief summary, this custom user model will represent a user in our farm management system, and it will have several fields such as the username, the password, the first name, the last name, phone number, the sex, as well as these other fields that are Boolean flags that will indicate if either a user is a farm owner, farm manager, assistant farm manager, a team leader, or even a worker. And this model as well has several methods that shall help us assign these fields to specific users, such as the assigning a farm owner method. When called on a user, it actually populates this farm owner field to be true. So basically, these are the fields that are here. We have a username field that is a character field of a maximum length of 45, the first name, the last name, the phone number, the sex, the is farm owner, is farm manager field, is assistant farm manager field, is team leader, is farm worker. So amongst all these fields, the one that is quite unique is the phone number field, that actually uses the phone number field from this package, the phone number field from the phone number fields package. And so I believe that's enough for the fields. So the methods that I've just talked about is this one, the assign farm owner, assign farm manager, assign assistant farm manager, and the rest. So I'll just quickly go into one because the logic is the same for these others. The rationale of having this method over here is to simplify assigning of a farm owner. For example, if you have a view that is actually intended to assign a user as a farm owner, all we need to do is to just call this method on that user, and then the user will be automatically assigned as a farm owner, or rather flagged as a farm owner. As you can see, it will flag this farm owner as true and make sure that all those other fields are false. So that is the same principle of operation for all these ones, except for the ones for the dismissal. So the ones for the dismissal as well, all they just do is that, for example, if you want to dismiss a farm owner, all we need to do is to just call this method, and then it will mark the is farm owner field as false. And so that's it for all these other dismissal methods. And then we have the get full name method that will actually return a concatenated string of the user's full name, that is the first name and the last name. We also have the get role that will actually go and check which fields are actually true and then return the role of the user in our farm. We also have the get farm workers that shall return a query set of users in our farm that have the is farm worker to be true, the team leaders, assistant farm managers. So we also override the clean method, perform some custom validations, and in the spirit of brevity and clarity in our code, I decided to separate the code responsible for validations of our fields so that our code becomes much more readable and understandable. And I created a new file called the validators.py. So in the validators.py, we have this custom class method that shall actually have some two methods, the validate sex and also the validate username. So in the validate sex, this method will actually require a single parameter that is a sex. So it will actually go ahead and do some validations. For example, it will validate if the sex field is empty, as well as if the sex choice that is actually sent to our server is not within the sex choice.values, and it will throw appropriate error. We also validate the username to ensure that it does not exist in our database, of which if this is violated, that is a username that already exists in our database sent with a new user, then it shall throw this error, the username already exists. Then now back to our models.py, we override the save method to call the clean method to ensure that these two fields are actually validated. And then in this model, we also have a certain redundant method, at least for now, but I'll see on where to actually put it. So this method shall help us generate a username that is unique. And then we have the permissions.py file that actually has the classes that shall define the permissions based on what we have as roles in our custom user model. The first permission being the is farm owner that inherits from the base permission. So this base permission is from the REST framework permissions module. And so in order to create our custom permission, we need to override the has permission method that is provided by the base permission. So all we do is that, this permission is quite simple, so I really don't have to specify a lot of stuff. And in the spirit of just simplicity, brevity, and conciseness, I decided to just have it this simple. So in this permission, we shall be checking if the user is already authenticated, as well as if the is farm owner field is true. And if that's the case, this permission shall grant that request or that view to be processed. And if not, it shall raise a permission denied with a message, only farm owners have permission to perform this action. The similar principle applies to the is farm manager, but a little bit of tweaking here and there. In this has permission method, we shall be checking if the user is either a farm manager or is a farm owner. It makes sense this way. If the is farm manager can access a specific resource, the farm owner himself or herself also need to have permissions to access that. And this eliminates a lot of permissions that we shall have defined in this file. And so proceeding to the assistant farm manager, that also works the same. It's only that now for the assistant farm manager, it shall allow both the assistant farm manager, the farm manager himself or herself, as well as the farm owner. The farm worker as well, permissions just operate on the same principle, as well as the team leader. And then now we move forward to the serializers.py, where in the serializers.py we have these two serializers, the custom user create serializer as well as the custom user serializer. All this inherits the user create serializer and also the user serializers from the JOSA serializers. So the reason why we are doing this is because we shall be using JOSA for our authentication, things like registration of a new user, login in, and also the login out. And JOSA requires that if you actually customize the default Django user model, you need to actually also create your own custom serializer. So that's the reason why we are inheriting from the base user create serializer from the JOSA serializers module. And then now all we need to do is just to specify the fields. So since we had also defined the phone number with a different package, all we need to do is just to pop out the phone number and serialize it with specific serializer phone number field that is also available from that very same package, the Django phone number field package. And the same thing applies to the custom user serializer and some typical usage of what this serializer actually does, either serialization or deserialization of the data from our database or from the view. And then now we proceed to the views.py. When the views.py, first of all, I've defined the custom user view set that inherits from the model view set. So this view set shall provide us with all the CRUD functionality for the custom user accounts, that is the list, retrieve, the create, the update, and also the delete. So this is the way it's being defined. And so the reason why we are actually overriding the getSerializer class that is by default found within the model view set is to ensure that when JOSA actually notices that we are creating, or rather if this view notices that we are creating a new user, then we shall be using the serializer of the custom user create serializer. Or if there's just the retrieval, listing, or maybe the updating, then we use the custom user serializer. And then this file has several views, like the assign farm owner view that actually subclasses the API view. So as the name suggests, the assign farm owner view means that this view shall only be focusing on assigning a user to be a farm owner. And in this case, this view shall only accept the post request, and it's a view that shall only permit the farm owners to actually do the operations inside it. And so I'll quickly go ahead and explain what's really happening inside the post method. So since this is an API view, there are the post, the list, the delete, the update, and stuff of that kind that are by default they are found within these API views. So since this our API view shall only be working with the post, that's what we shall override. And in this case, this our method shall actually accept a single parameter, that is the request object from the client or maybe the browser or just wherever that this view is accessed from. And so to mark these users as farm owners, all we need to do is to actually pass the list of these user IDs. I think this is the very best way of doing so, since we can use the IDs to retrieve the users and then call the methods that we have defined in our model. And in this case, we shall be passing a list, or rather our view shall be expecting a list of user IDs. This is also optimal because sometimes we might want to assign just a single user as a farm owner, or maybe sometimes we want to do the batch assignment. So it will work with both. We also now actually store the current user ID that's associated with the request. So we define some 3 lists over here: the assigned users, the not found IDs, the invalid IDs. So this shall be actually being populated as the views actually process the information that is actually sent into it. So first of all, we start iterating. Since this is a list, we can iterate through it. We first of all iterate through it in a try and except catch block. Then we try convert the user ID item that is actually found from the user ID list that is passed into our request. So I know you might be wondering, why are we converting this thing back to integer? Even if, let's say, from our front end we send integers, that is user ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are supposed to be assigned as farm owner. Why is it that are we converting it back? So what really happens is that whenever the request reaches this view, it will be, yes, a list, but it will be a list of string integers, that is 1, which is actually a string. And so that's the reason why we pass it into the integer. Then this shall actually process it. If it's not able to be converted back to an integer, then it will throw an error, or if it's converted, then the subsequent operations shall actually occur. And then now, if that's actually converted, then what we really do is that we now get, or rather we retrieve, the custom user with that very specific ID, and then check if that user ID is the very same user ID that's associated with the request that we had actually defined in this variable over here. If that's the case, then now we actually throw this error: you cannot assign roles to yourself. Or if that's actually not the case, that is the user ID that's actually retrieved over here is a valid user that's not the very same user that's actually sending the request, then we call the method that we are defined in our models, the assigned farm owner, and then we append that user's username into the assigned users list over here, so that we shall use it to give some appropriate and informative response. For example, these users were assigned as farm owners. So there's an exception within this try except catch block, that is if this actually returns an error. For example, we had maybe a, or rather an a string that is actually being tried to be converted back to an integer. So let's say that there was some erroneous data that was sent to our view to process, for example a user ID with a, so that will actually lead to a value error. So that's actually what we are capturing over here. Or if the user ID that's actually passed over here, let's say that we had only 20 users and the ID that's passed is, let's say, 50, ID 50. So that actually will mean that we'll get the index error, since that will be out of range of the user objects that we have in our database, and that will actually raise the custom user does not exist. So we also do some processing inside this except block, where if the user ID is actually a digit, that is a valid digit, let's say even if it's out of range of the number of users that we have in our database, then we'll append that ID into the not found IDs list over here. Or if the invalid ID is sent, that is a case of, let's say, a string that is, let's say, A, B, C is sent to our view, the view will append it to the invalid IDs. And then we construct an appropriate response where if the assigned users list, the list over here, so this technically means that if there's something inside the users list and then the users list is greater than 1, we can apply this length method onto a list to actually get the number of items that are in that list. So if it's greater than 1, that means that several users have been assigned as the farm manager. And then we construct a response message that is the users. It will join all the username of those people who have been assigned that are found within the list of the assigned users have been assigned as farm owners. Or if the length of the assigned users is equal to 1, then we shall send this message: the user blah 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 has been assigned as a farm owner. So the reason why we are accessing it this way is that the assigned users was a list, and since now in this case we are accessing only a single item, or rather the only item that is within the list, this is the syntax. The bracket 0 shall actually indicate that we are accessing the very first item from the list. So this actually operates the same, where if the not found IDs, the ones that are out of range, or rather the returning the customer does not exist error, we shall also do the same thing, as well as the invalid IDs, and then we return a response that is containing the response data. So this one over here with the status code of HTTP status 200 OK. So all these other views, like the assigned farm manager view, the only difference over here is that we were having the user assigned farm owner called over here. So in this case, let me show you a little bit. The only difference is that we are having the assigned farm manager called now, and some little bit of tweaking here, like for example over there we had the farm owners, now we have the farm managers. So that basically works with all these other views, the assigned farm worker view, the dismiss farm manager view. So it's only that for the dismissal, all we need to do is just basically call the method that was defined in our models, that is the dismiss farm manager. And now we head over to the urls.py. So our urls.py, there's nothing much over here. It's only that we've defined all the URLs that are actually responsible for the assigning, the dismissal, the login, and stuff of that kind. So starting with the very first two, I think these are the ones that are quite unique. So we have the login URL. So we shall be using the token create view that is from the JOSA views for the login, as well as the token destroy view from the same JOSA views for the logout. And then the generate username shall help us generate unique usernames for our farm workers or maybe our farm staff. Then now we have these other URLs that is for the assigning farm owner, farm manager, assistant farm manager, the team leader, and the work. So I'm pretty sure that you really understand how this really works. Then we also have the URLs for the dismissal, that is the dismiss farm manager, assistant, the team leader, as well as the farm worker. And that's it for the URLs. So we head over to the test folder, where I've actually refactored how I had defined tests in this entire project. At first, or rather in the previous tutorials, we had tests in specific, or rather we had the test folders in specific apps. So now we shall have a single central folder that is at the root of our project named tests. Then inside this folder, we shall have folders with the specific app names. That is, for example, today we're talking of users app. We shall have a folder named users app, and inside that users app is where now we have the tests folder. So that in the test folders is where now we have the test specific to that app. I believe this is the very best way of actually defining these tests, so that you really don't have the hassle of going in through the different folders of the apps to actually just check into their tests. You have one central folder that you can actually just go inside it, go to the specific app directories tests, then now work with them over there. And in this folder over here, it's quite noticeable that we have a new file that is named the conftest.py. This conftest.py file is actually used by our newly introduced testing package that is a PyTest. So PyTest recognizes this file as containing the fixtures that we shall use in our test, let's say in the test views. So it offers a very convenient way of actually doing this, where anything that we want to use as a fixture, we only need to actually mark it with the @PyTest fixtures decorator, like we are doing to this very function, the setup users. And since our setup users will be actually supplying us with the registered and also the logged in farm owner, farm worker, maybe the farm manager, and etc., we also need to actually ensure that it has a database access. This ensures that it actually gives us a real impression of actually how this stuff interacts with our database. And before we proceed with the setup users, I'll give you a quick primer of what's really happening over here by actually going to the official documentation of the JOSA readthedocs.io. So over here, they're explaining how JOSA actually registers, logs in, and all that stuff about the user. So in order to register a new user, we send a post request with the request payload. In this case, they have the username and also the password. And after sending that request, the response is that user's details. And then over here, they really try to actually access the user's details by sending a GET request. And then they get a for one unauthorized access response of authentication credentials are not provided. And then now, if we really try logging in, remember this URL is for accessing the user details. And then now, if we try logging in, we send a post request with the request payload of the username and also the password. And then it returns a token. That's actually what we shall use to make subsequent HTTP requests. So we shall supply this token as the header. So over here, they again try accessing the user after retrieving this token without the token actually being passed as the header. Then you see the error is still there for one unauthorized access, where we shall get the authentication credentials were not provided. But then if now they send the GET request with the authorization header of the token, then now they retrieve the user's details. And then they log out with the very same token that we are given whenever we log in. After logging out, then they try accessing the user credentials with the very same token that they have just logged out with that. So that's actually now returns the invalid token, since after logging out, that token is actually invalidated. So basically that's what's really happening. That's the user flow of, let's say, the logging, the registration, and stuff of that kind. So that's what we are actually doing over here, where we define the farm owner data, that is the username, password, first name, last name, phone number, the sex, and also the is farm owner to be true. And then we send a post request with the request payload to be the farm owner data. And then now the response, of course, shall be the farm owner with the username, password, and stuff of that kind. So we retrieve all this because we shall be using this for the subsequent test in our views and stuff of that kind. And then after registering this new farm owner, we log in that farm owner to ensure that the farm owner has some valid authentication token. Similarly, we apply the same principle to the farm manager data, assistant farm manager, the farm worker, and also even a regular user that does not have the flags of the eFarm manager or even the eFarm worker. You can see that our setup users method yields a lot of stuff in a dictionary format, that is the regular user's ID, the farm owner token, the farm manager username, the team leader username, and many more. So we shall use all this stuff in order to test our views. So inside the views, I'll actually just go through just a single test so that I really don't waste a lot of time, because all these are tests, they're just following the same principle and there's not really much that's actually different within the test. So in this case, you remember you have the setup method that actually avails the variable just before running each and every method in this test role assignment class. So all we need to do is to extract all those variables from the setup users method. So after doing that, first of all, test if we can assign ourselves a role. Of course, this will return a validation error. So all we need to do is that the user expects a list of user ID. We pass the very farm owner ID, that is the ID of the user that's actually associated with this request, as you will see. Then we pass an authorization error of the farm owner token. Now you already know that this is a farm owner token and this is the farm owner ID. We cannot assign ourselves to be a farm owner, and that's what we are actually trying over here. And then we send a post request to the URL of the assigned farm manager with the request payload of the ID that is actually passed over here, and also the authorization headers that we have over here. And we assert that it will return a HTTP status, the 400 baud request, and also the response message that we have over there is that we cannot assign roles to ourselves. So all these are just the same. For example, even in dismissing an assistant farm manager, you can see over here is that we pass the user ID. So we pass the ID of the user of the farm manager that's actually to be dismissed, and the authorization token, of course. This is a action that actually requires a farm owner, and if we try using maybe somebody who is not a farm owner, we shall get a HTTP status 403 forbidden. So we try doing that, then we send a post request to the dismiss assistant farm manager view or the URL, then the request payload is the ID over here, and then we assert that the user is actually dismissed and the status is 200 OK, and the response message is user blah 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 has been dismissed as assistant farm manager. And so I believe that's it for showing all these tests. You can go ahead and play with all these others. There are so many, probably around 20 or so. So I'll just go ahead and give them some run and see if they actually work. And so you can see it takes a little bit of time, so I just go ahead and fast forward all this stuff. Great, now we can see that in 28 seconds we already ran the 18 tests, and all of them that we've defined here have passed. And so that's it for this tutorial. If you find this tutorial useful and informative, please share, subscribe and like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.